Peach and Love Records.
The main thing that I felt from meditation was the realization that all the goodness and all the strength and things that can support life is all coming out of love, and not just as simple as, one guy saying to a chick, I love you, like an emotional sort of thing, that is, but the love of just real love, which is like unconditional love, because so often we say, I love you if, I love you when, I love you but, and that's not real love. I love you, just unconditionally, that goes beyond everything, and that is a pretty far out love to try and conceive. And when I realized a little bit of love, then I realized how shallow it was. And with love, it's like, okay, I love you, but how do you measure it? How do you live it? How do you be it? And then you realize how limited you are, and then it's a process of learning how to develop that. It's all right saying I love you, but if people do that, they say, okay, I love you, but let's see it manifest. I don't want to just hear the word. I want to feel it and see it and be it.
Initially, he was known as the Quiet Beatle. Later, however, he became an enigmatic figure cloaked in the deep folds of Eastern mysticism. While the public saw him as a complex quarter of the most acclaimed pop group in history, this gifted musician chose to define himself as merely a simple gardener who planted flowers and patiently watched them grow. George Harrison was born February 25, 1943, in Wavertree, Liverpool, the fourth and youngest child of bus driver Harry Harrison and his wife Louise. Growing up in a modest council house in nearby Speke, young George was a well-behaved, good-natured child who especially loved to play on a giant meteorite outside the Wavertree Baths. There were, however, early glimmers of the man of character and substance he would one day become. During his family's budgeted holidays in pastoral Wales, lodging in sparse stone cottages honed his love of the simplicities of rural life. He once observed, "You could actually live a whole happy life in a place like that." In an exclusive 1983 interview in London, Paul McCartney remembered George's parents.
Harry Harrison and Louise Harrison. Harry was a bus driver who was a great man, lovely man, but forthright, very sort of straightforward. He would run over a dog with his bus rather than swerve. And quite rightly too, probably, because he might kill people. I remember always being a little bit disturbed about that hardness. But he was a good lad, Harry. He was a real nice man, sweetie. And Louise was lovely. She was a quite hard lady, but, soft side. But she was a hard lady. I remember her pouring a pan of water on some fella. She didn't want to answer the door to. She'd tell you, Louise.
There were also early buddings of an altruistic, compassionate nature. One time, the Harrisons took then 8-year-old George to the cinema, where they saw a homeless man on the street. George insisted on giving the destitute fellow half a crown. Decades later, while leaving a trendy London restaurant with pals Legs Larry Smith and Rolling Stone Bill Wyman, Harrison encountered another down-on-his-luck person and passed along a crisp 50-pound note. It was an act friends said he repeated often and, characteristically, without fanfare. When Harrison turned 13, music roared into his world. When his mother spotted guitar doodlings in a school notebook, she scraped together a few pounds to buy her son a battered second-hand acoustic guitar. Yet unlike many of his virtuoso contemporaries, most notably Eric Clapton, Harrison was no guitar prodigy, but rather listened over and over to popular songs and plugged away diligently to master the chords, often until his fingers bled. His exhaustive labor paid off, and before long he and his brother Pete formed a band called the Rebels, performing skiffle tunes at Speke's British Legion Club. Meanwhile, in 1954, upon enrolling at the Liverpool Institute, George was a largely disinterested student, really excelling only in art. Music now a driving force, the quiet adolescent struck up a friendship with fellow schoolmate Paul McCartney, 1 year ahead of him. As it happened, Paul's fledgling rock group The Quarrymen were looking for a lead guitarist, and McCartney dragged Harrison to an audition with Teddy Boy John Lennon. Although the older Lennon curtly denounced the young musician as far too baby-faced for his rebel rock and roll band, Harrison's astute rendition of the tune Raunchy left the cocky bandleader with no choice but to bring the talented guitarist on board, adding an indelible piece of the musical legend about to emerge. With the explosive launch of British Beatlemania in 1963, Harrison's steady guitar work became a pivotal ingredient in the towering success of the group's countless chart-topping hits. Harrison's vastly underrated, sterling musicianship both shaped and drove the classic Fab Four sound. For years, pop pundits have been arguing over the origin of the name Beatles, coming up with various explanations. Here, Harrison himself sets the record straight.
Well, there's always been stories on who invented the name, and there's the versions about how we wanted it to, like the Crickets and this sort of thing, but Stuart Sutcliffe, who was an art student with John at the Liverpool College of Art, he was very much into Marlon Brando, and in particular in that movie The Wild Ones, and I always got the impression when they came that John and Stuart were together that night of the next morning when it came, we've got a good name. And then in years following, it was always taken that John thought of the name, but I came across I got a videotape of The Wild Ones, and I couldn't believe it when I saw that Lee Marvin saying to Marlon Brando, saying, I forget what the words were, but something like, we think you're a schmuck Johnny, and the Beatles think you're a schmuck Johnny. I said, wait a minute, back that up. And I said, did I hear that? The Beatles. And so that's how I came in. Somehow I mentioned that, and they went and found the script of it, and so I would say that based upon that Stuart Sutcliffe had a lot to do with it.
After the Beatles first emerged from local obscurity in 1963, the British papers coined the dubious expressions Mercy Beat and the Liverpool Sound to try and describe the group's groundbreaking music. Neither term, however, particularly impressed any of the boys, as George explains.
They didn't want to say it was rock and roll because rock's supposed to have gone out about 5 years ago, and so they decided it wasn't really rhythm and blues, so they decided to call it the Liverpool Sound, which is, it was stupid really, because as far as we were concerned, it was just the same as the rock from 5 years ago. Well, it's more like the old rock, it's just, everything's a bit louder, more bass and bass drum. And everybody sort of sings loud and shouts, and that's it. All the records now, everybody's sort of making records in that style.
Here is a rare interview with the Beatles recorded in Paris in 1963. Listen carefully to the interviewer's now impossible to imagine concern that the listeners might not really be aware of who John, Paul, George, and Ringo actually are.
We're visiting with 4 young men. And if I just mention their first names, such as Paul and George and Ringo and John, I doubt if you'd know about whom we're speaking. But if I said we're here this afternoon with the Beatles, and if we were in England, I think we'd get a great big rousing hurrah, wouldn't we, boys?
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's see. We have, to my right here, we have Paul McCartney. Now, within the past year, you have mushroomed and tremendously almost out of sight in such popularity. What was the click? What levered this great rage for the Beatles?
Well, it's funny, really, now you mention that. But I think it was the Palladium show, the television show in England. And then following hot in the footsteps, and we had the Royal Variety Command Variety Performance. It's difficult to say that, actually. No, Royal Variety Command Performance for the Queen Mother, you know. And it all came up from there, really. The national newspapers got hold of it, and they got hold of Ringo, you know. And Mike Brown found about it, yeah. But a lot of things, you know, a lot of columnists and things got onto the idea and started calling it Beatlemania.
Since you boys have gained your current popularity, have there been many other organizations trying to imitate you or perhaps take the thunder away from you? Let's ask John Lemon this.
Well, I suppose a couple of people have jumped on the railway carriage, I mean the bandwagon, but it doesn't really matter, you know, because it's flattery and it sort of promotes the whole idea of us. If we're away and there's a few little Beatles still going, it'll remind people of us.
Well, we've been told that in England today there's this Beatlemania going on. Now, what do you describe? What would you say Beatlemania is? That all the girls scream whenever they see you and they perhaps faint waiting in line? Let's be immodest a moment. What is the attraction, huh?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's that dressing gown. George's dressing gown is definitely a big attraction.
No, I don't think any of us really know what it is. We've been asked this question an awful lot of times, but we've never been able to come up with an answer yet, because I think it's a collection of so many different things, like happening to be there at the right time, at the right moment, at the wrong face. No, but a little bit of originality in the songs, a little bit of a different sound. I don't know, it's an awful lot of things. Maybe the gimmick of the haircut as well, the luck, getting into the national press at the right time. So it's an awful lot of luck.
All these things and more.
We've seen you here at the Olympia. Can you compare the French audience with what you're familiar with back in England?
Well, there's a lot of difference, because in England, you see, the audience is a 75% female. Here, 75% male. And that's the main difference, really, because they still appreciate it, but you don't get the full noise and the atmosphere of a place.
No screams.
No screams and fainting. Why is it 75% boys?
I don't know, but I think they don't let the girls out at night in France. One of the reasons. I think it's your dressing gown. Somebody said that they still have to have chaperones, a lot of them, you see. Whereas in England they're out, you know, and the boys, yeah, and it's funny, it's the same in Germany. All the boys, you know, like the rock, and it's usually the same on the continent. I don't really know why.
And you coined this, yeah, yeah, yeah. Isn't that really sweeping England right now? The phrasing, yeah, 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 on all the songs?
Yeah, well, that was the sort of main catchphrase from She Loves You. But we stuck that on, we'd written the song nearly, and then we suddenly needed more, so we had yeah, yeah, yeah. And it caught on, you know, they used it for, you know, if you're going to be with it or hip.
That's sort of a trademark for you boys now.
Yeah, we'll have to write another song with it.
So I understand in about a week or 10 days you're going to be on the Ed Sullivan Show. Could you tell us about it?
Yeah, that's right. We're going to do Ed Sullivan Show in New York, and we're taping one for later release, sort of thing. And we're looking forward to those. Then we go down to Florida, Miami. Can't wait. And we do another Ed Sullivan there. But I think before that we do a Carnegie Hall, don't we? Yeah. Oh, yeah. We play on Carnegie Hall.
How were you selected for Ed Sullivan? Was he in England and caught your act or something?
Well, yeah, well, when we were flying back, this is the story we heard. We were arriving from Stockholm into London Airport, and at the same time, the Prime Minister and the Queen Mother were also flying out, but the airport was just overrun with teenagers. There was thousands of them waiting for us to get back, and Ed Sullivan was supposed to have arrived at that time and wondered what was going on, and he found out it was us arriving. And also our manager went over to the States with another singer called Billy J. Kramer, and he did a couple of TV shows over there, and while he was over there, our manager got the bookings with Ed Sullivan. But he'd also heard of us from this London airport thing, and that's about it.
And how about a movie? Is there a movie in the future?
Yeah. We've been asked by United Artists to do a feature movie.
Will it be dramatic or just strictly wrapped around your singing?
No, we don't know yet, really, what it's going to be like. I don't think we'll have to do an awful lot of acting. I think it'll be written around the sort of people that we are, and there'll be 4 characters in it, very like us.
Well, do you plan to compose 2 or 3 songs specifically for the film?
Well, actually, we've got to compose 6 songs specifically for the film. We've got to get down to that, too. That's a job.
Then you boys really haven't had much of a chance to see Paris, have you?
No, not really.
Not really, no.
What do you think of it so far?
Well, it's nice, quite nice, you know.
How about the French girls compared to the British girls?
Oh, we haven't seen any yet.
John? Yeah, well, I'm married. Didn't notice them.
Oh, we'll go back to Paul then.
Yeah, I think they're great.
Oh, you're single.
Yeah, I think the French girls are fabulous. Yeah.
But we have seen more French boys than French girls, so I mean, you know, we can't really tell.
Well, perhaps when you get to the Ed Sullivan Show, there'll be more girls for you.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Any of you been to America before?
Yeah, me. I went in September just for a holiday for 3 weeks.
Just George Harrison. Well, I see our time is up, boys, and thank you very much, Beatles, for being our guest.
Literally forced into the public eye, the reclusive Beatle was propelled into a megastardom he was neither prepared for nor ever really felt comfortable with. It was only in the sanctity of the recording studio where Harrison could hone his signature riffs and polish the few compositions which made their way onto Beatles albums where the laid-back guitarist found some measure of artistic fulfillment. Stardom, however, was responsible for introducing George to the blonde, kittenish model Pattie Boyd. From their first meeting on the set of the Beatles' film A Hard Day's Night in 1964, the couple became inseparable and married on January 21st, 1966, settling into a fashionable Esher bungalow outside London. Beautiful Pattie was the waifish pop princess to the Beatles' trendy young guitarist. As the Beatles' boisterous bandwagon made its way across North America, they were questioned on everything from the origin of their haircuts to their favorite foods, and nothing particularly deeper. By way of example, we present these clips from a 1966 press conference in Hollywood.
I'd like to direct this question to George Harrison, if I may.
What's your new address?
George, before you left England, you made a statement that you were going now to America to be beaten up by Americans. Do you mean to say in so many words that you feel that the American fan is more a hostile fan?
No, not at all.
Or a more enthusiastic?
Actually, I said that when we arrived back from Manila. They said, what are you going to do next? And I said, we're going to rest up before we go and get beaten up over there. Merely beaten up is just... really, we just get sort of shoved around a bit. Jostled around in cars and planes. So, you know, that's all it is.
Well, you think that's more an enthusiastic fan than a hostile fan, would you say?
I think there's definitely more enthusiastic fans.
But if anyone's going to beat us up, it's not the fans, is it?
Yeah, the fan thing, I think they proved it themselves, you know, after this. We found out that there are a lot of fans who are great. And all the ones we lost, I think, we don't really mind anyway. Because if they can't make up their minds, who needs them?
One question we like in Hollywood, we'd like to know how you compare movie working to, say, the concert tour or recording sessions.
Well, we don't compare it much, you know.
Would you rather play the Hollywood Bowl again than Dodger Stadium?
We don't really mind.
Maybe we can start another controversy here. One of your countrymen was here yesterday or the day before he returned to England, or on his arrival in England. He said he thought American women were out of style for not wearing miniskirts, and that because they didn't wear miniskirts, their legs were ugly. I'd like to ask you what you think about American women's legs.
Well, if they don't wear miniskirts, how does he know their legs are ugly? You know, the album cover that was banned here, you know, the one with the dolls and the meat. Whose idea was it? And
the photographers who took it.
John, why did you decide to make How I Won the War, minus the other Beatles?
Because he just asked me, you know, and I just said yes. And it was just like that.
Do you consider that now, since you've been in the United States here for almost a week, that this religious issue is answered once and for all? Would you clarify and repeat the answer that you gave in Chicago?
I can't repeat it again because I don't know what I said, you know.
Well, would you clarify the remarks that were attributed to you?
You tell me what you think I meant, and I'll tell you whether I agree or...
Well, some of the remarks attributed to you in some of the newspapers, the press here, said that concerning the remark that you made comparing the relative popularity of the Beatles with Jesus Christ and that the Beatles were more popular. This created quite a controversy and a furor in this country, as you are obviously aware.
Do you know that, John?
Now, would you clarify the remark?
Well, I've clarified it about 800 times, you know. I could have said TV or something else, you know, and that's as clear as it can be. I just use Beatles because I know about them a bit more than TV. I could have said any number of things. Wouldn't have got as much publicity, though.
My question is directed at all of you. Do you think this controversy has hurt your careers or has helped you professionally? Obviously, you're quite aware of it.
It hasn't helped or hindered it, I don't think. I think most sensible people took it for what it was, and it was only the bigots that took it up and thought it was, you know, on their side. They thought, haha, here's something to get them for. But when they read it, they saw that, you know, there was nothing wrong with it, really. It's just that they thought that by us saying, by John saying that we were more popular than Jesus, they thought, you know, he's bound to be arrogant. And did you see the fellow on telly last night? He said it. Tonight Show.
John, what stimulates you in your work?
Just anything, you know.
And also, what's your favorite group in the U.S.?
Favorite what?
Group in the United States.
I've got a few, you know. Birds, Spoonful, Mamas and Papas, I suppose.
Beach
on
Boys.
That side of it.
Beach
and
Boys.
Miracles, etc. on the other side of it.
My question concerns money. I was wondering if you still have an arrangement with the U.S. Internal Revenue Department to pay your taxes to England through them. Another part of the question is, how much money have you grossed in your current U.S. tour, and is it true that you lost?
We don't know.
Money's got nothing
We don't
to
know
do with
about
us.
that.
You know,
we don't do the money side of it, you know. Brian does that.
And we don't particularly worry about it.
Tell us what we get in the end.
The tax thing.
We pay tax and things, but we don't know how much or how much we've made or anything, you know, because if we were going to worry about that, we'd be nervous wrecks by now.
I'd like to direct this question to Messrs. Lennon and McCartney. In a recent article, Time magazine put down pop music, and they referred to Day Tripper as being about a prostitute, and Norwegian Wood as being about a lesbian. Now, I just wanted to know what your intent was when you wrote it, and what your feeling is about the Time magazine criticism of the music that is being written today.
We were just trying to write songs about prostitutes and lesbians, that's all.
Do you have will you be working separately in the future? Or together?
So all together, probably.
Together? John Lennon, aren't you doing a picture alone?
Yeah, but I mean, that's only in the holiday bit, you know.
I see.
In between Beatles.
Fred Paul from KASK. First of all, I'd like to say hi to you all again. It's really good to see you. And so,
go on, Fred.
I'd like to ask a question that you've never been asked before. What are you going to do when the bubble bursts?
Well, Fred. You know, that's a personal in-joke. He used to ask it at every press conference we went to keep the party going.
Do you think we'll have another tour again next year?
Could be, Fred. Could be. Brian does that.
Thank you very much.
He does a lot of it,
Fred.
Outside in Hollywood tonight, you had to arrive in an armored truck, and the truck was swarmed by adoring fans. What is the situation wherever you go? Do you ever have a an opportunity to walk out in the street without being recognized, or can you walk into a theater to see a movie by yourself?
If you go and the lights are down, you can go in.
We can do that in England. It's easier in England than it is here. And it's mainly because we know England better.
It'd also be easier to do it if we were on tour, you know. Because we're on tour, people know where we are, that's why we have a crowd.
Paul?
I waved that
Paul? Paul?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Many of the top artists and musicians in the pop field today have said that the Beatles have been a major influence in their music. Are there any other artists who have an important influence on you, the music you create?
Oh, yes. Nearly everyone. You know, we pinch as much from other people as they pinch from us, you know.
Ringo, do you carry wallet pictures of your baby with you?
No.
No? Why?
I don't carry photos of anything, you know.
Thank you.
You can remember.
You know.
May I ask about the song Eleanor Rigby? What was the motivation or inspiration for that?
Two queers.
John, did you ever...
Two barrow boys.
Oh, this is getting disgusting. What?
John, did you ever meet Cass of the Mamas and Papas?
Yes, and she's great. And I'm seeing her tonight.
Good.
Yeah, she's good.
Have you ever trained or used Beatle doubles as decoys?
No.
No. We tried to get Brian Epstein to do it. He wouldn't do it.
Like the dresses to John and Paul, you write a lot of stuff that other people steal from you and also purchase from you in different arrangements, Ella Fitzgerald and a lot of these Boston Pops and stuff like that. When you listen to this on the radio or records and stuff, how do you feel about them using your pieces and changing them around to suit their styles?
Depends how they do it, you know.
The thing is, they don't steal it.
No, I know that.
Well, you just said they did.
Well, sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, you know, once we've done a song and it's published, anyone can do it. So, you know, whether we like it or not depends on whether they've done it to our taste. You know,
well, then let's ask it this way. Who do you think does it the best, the Beatles songs?
Us.
Who?
Us.
Oh.
For those of us that have followed your career from the early days of Liverpool and Hamburg, and the pride in you've been awarded the MBE, and the dismay of the unwarranted adverse publicity of late, the question is, individually, what has been your most memorable occasions, and what has been the most disappointing?
Well,
no idea.
You know, there's so many.
I think Manila was the most disappointing.
Yeah. And the most exciting is yet to come.
Gentlemen?
Maybe the most disappointing.
Gentlemen, there was quite a laugh when you went on the stock market with your stock. How is your stock doing?
Fine, thank you.
Well, it went down, but it's coming up again.
It's gone
It went down after
It's the same as any other stock, you know.
It goes down every time, and the LPs drop out. They all think they're buying bits of record.
How has your image changed since '63? Is it a little more? Is it the same?
An image
bright,
is how
shiny?
you see us, so you know you can only answer
You're
that.
the only one that knows.
Who's that? Oh,
It's you.
Oh,
You.
well. No, I want to get your opinion. Is it a little tarnished now? Is it more realistic, or what would you say it is? I know I have my opinion,
We haven't
but
got any tags for our opinion.
We can't tell you our image, you know. We can only our image is what we read in the newspapers, and that's the same as you read, you know. I mean, we know our real image, which is nothing like our image.
Forget it.
And what I meant to say was,
I like take 2 bricks.
No comment.
Mr. Lennon, is it true you're planning to give up music for a career in the field of comparative religion?
No. Is that another of the jokes going on?
I'm sure you've all heard of the many Beatle burnings and Beatle bonfires. And I was wondering, do you think American girls are fickle?
All girls are fickle.
Well, the photos we saw of them were a sort of middle-aged DJs and 12-year-olds burning a pile of LP covers.
This question is directed to Paul and John. You have written quite a few numbers for Peter and Gordon, and I understand they don't like it because they think that it's you writing the song that makes it popular. Do you plan to write any more songs for them?
If we write songs for them, they ask us to write songs for them if we do it. I mean, they don't mind it. They like it, but it's... People come up and say, we see you just getting in on the Lennon-McCartney bandwagon. That's why they did that one with our names not on it, Woman. Because everyone sort of thinks that's the reason they get hits. It's not true, really.
Gentlemen, what do you think would happen to you four if you came to an appearance without the armored truck and without police?
We'd get in a lot easier.
We wouldn't make it. We couldn't do it.
It depends, Sometimes we could have easily made it much better without the armored truck. But today, probably we wouldn't have.
You think you'd be physically harmed?
Oh, yeah, probably.
What do you think?
Yes, I think so.
Could be.
Gentlemen, the New York Times Magazine of Sunday, July 3, carried an article by Maureen Cleave in which she quotes the Beatles, not by name, as saying, "Show business is an extension of the Jewish religion." Would you mind amplifying that?
I said that to her as well. No comment.
Oh. Come on, John. Tell us what you mean.
I mean, you can read into it what you like, It's just a little old statement. It's not very serious,
I understand there's a suit pending against the Beatles by Peter Best, who claims to be a former member of the Beatles. Is that true? Was he once a former?
I think he's had a few, but we don't bother with those.
Is this the last question? Are all of your news conferences like this?
No.
Well,
that's not the last
I'm talking about all of the reporters or would-be reporters or semi-reporters that show up. Are you besieged by these kind of people throughout the tours that you travel here in the United States?
You can't always tell the would-bes from the real thing. So
Is it this way when you travel in Europe?
Yes.
But what's wrong with the crowd?
Nothing. I'm just wondering if you have this many reporters everywhere you go.
Not always.
But some of them are just onlookers.
Tomorrow. This is the last question. Thank you. All right, tomorrow never comes. It's the last cut on the second side, right?
Tomorrow never knows.
Tomorrow never knows. Thank you. Could you give me a vague idea of some of the tape manipulation you used when your voice drops into the track, John? Is that sung backwards by any chance and then recorded forward?
No, it's not sung backwards. It's just. It's just recorded pretty straight. There's nothing really. There's tape loops on it, which are a bit different, and the words are from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So there.
The second half of the Peace and Love decade found Harrison casting forth on a journey which drew him ever deeper into devotional yoga. In June 1966, George attended a party at the home of Peter Sellers, where he was introduced to sitar virtuoso Ravi Shankar. The meeting had an instant and profound effect on his life, with Harrison proclaiming Shankar as greatest influence. That fall, George and Patty traveled to India for his intense training on the difficult sitar. Soon George wholeheartedly embraced both meditation and the Hare Krishna movement, which became a catalyst in the cultivation of his spiritual life. Never really content to simply walk the walk in the new spiritual path he was treading, Harrison was inspired to espouse his religious views pretty much every time he found himself in front of a microphone. Here's an all-but-forgotten example from the heady summer of 1967.
The indie music was really just another stepping stone to get me onto the spiritual side of it. I'm not sitting around and really studying it, but while I was in India, I just tried to find out as much about it as possible. Because in the West you hear stories, you hear, the mysticism and all this, and people levitating, and people in the Himalayas in caves. You hear all sorts of funny things. But by going there, it just confirmed lots of things that I'd heard. And I found out, it was great really, because the religion, it's a very strong thing there, because they've got nothing material or very little material wealth. And so the people over the thousands of years have had to turn to themselves, for some answer. And so they've got this great spiritual quality which is lacking in the West. You know, the whole thing of religion in the West, which is, like you were just saying before, question mark. And people are questioning it, the whole thing, you know. But over there I found out there's lots of people. There's always been people, you know, like Jesus Christ. Every generation, you know, there's people who know it and who pass it on to their disciples, who pass it on and keep passing it on. And so in India there's thousands of these people, you know, lots and lots of them. There's people who come to America as well, you know. There's just two spring to mind, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and another one called Mayor Baba. Now these are, you know, to the average Western person, they just look like a, you know, little Indian fellow with long hair and a beard. But in actual fact, you know, these people are so hip and so groovy, you know, that they can do all that, you know, all those tricks, that, you know, all those miracles and things, if they want to, you know. But that's not the point, you know. The thing is that they've attained perfection, and that they're going around trying to spread the word, you know, the same sort of thing as Jesus Christ, because it's all the same scene, you know. There's only one religion really, you know, whether you're Christian or a Hindu or Buddhist, whatever it is, they're all only branches off one big tree. But it was great because the Indian music led me to that sort of thing, which in return led me back to seeing the whole thing of Jesus Christ. Now I can appreciate him and really understand what the whole thing was about, because, you know, there's these people that are there all the time, and the whole point of Christ's resurrection became apparent, because the whole thing of the people who believed in him, because he's there physically, and then after he's been killed, then the resurrection is because he's got complete control over everything anyway, so he can materialize a body anywhere, any time, you know, just at will. And so the resurrection, he does that, so that they've witnessed his death, then they witnessed him there, flesh and blood, and touch him and see it all. And the whole thing of that is so that they can believe in him as the Spirit, you know, as the omnipresent Spirit in everything, which he is, you know. He's here now in this room if you believe. And that's the whole point of, you know, I mean, anybody can believe if he's there right in front of you. That's not really believing, is it? But to believe in just the spirit of being there in everything, it's too much, because the more you go into it, the more you see. You know, Plato said, "As for me, all I know is I know nothing." And that's what it is, you know. The more you learn, the more you know that you don't know anything.
The fact is, while being a Beatle gave George Harrison literally everything one could want in terms of material comforts, exotic experiences, and creative expression, he remained strangely unsatisfied and even spiritually hungry. For Harrison, Hinduism and devotional yoga was the means by which he sought the peace of mind and spiritual unity he was convinced was the key to a happy life. All things considered, pretty heady stuff for a very young, largely formally uneducated man like Harrison. Here was a classic, timeless quest, which had little to do with popular music, George's freewheeling, multi-millionaire hippie lifestyle, or his often earthbound pursuit of pleasure. This was the emergence of George Harrison as the brooding philosopher, armchair mystic, and aspiring yogi. While the other Beatles, too, had flirted with such high-flown ideas over the years, once Harrison stepped foot on the path, he was committed to trying to reach the goal. In that, at least, he kept his covenant with the love and peace philosophy of the 60s in a way that virtually none of the other major players in rock and roll ever managed.
Jeffrey Giuliano is the author of some 30 internationally best-selling books on the Beatles, John Lennon, and other iconic musicians of the 1960s. In 2006, his book, Paint It Black, The Murder of Brian Jones, was made into a film by Stephen Woolley and Nick Powell entitled Stoned, The Wild and Wicked World of Brian Jones. It remains a cult classic and the only film bio of the Rolling Stones. Giuliano is also a veteran journalist, having written for dozens of high-profile newspapers and magazines, including The Sunday People, The Daily Mail, The News of the World, The Mail on Sunday, Playgirl, and Rolling Stone. A noted film actor, Giuliano starred in such movies as Vikingdom, Scorpion King 3, Jules Verne's The Mysterious Island, The Fifth Execution, Far Cry 3, Fire Desire, among many. In addition, he hosted the long-running North American syndicated radio series, Jeffrey Giuliano's Roots of Rock, for 5 years, as well as pioneering the audiobook industry in the 1990s by authoring, narrating, and producing over 250 original, non-book-based, interview-driven productions. Giuliano's publishers included Random House, HarperCollins, Delta Entertainment, Durkin Hayes, Playaway Audio, Speechworks, and B&B Audio, among dozens more internationally. In 1998, Random House acquired his firm Tribute Audio, for which Giuliano acted as CEO and publisher for 5 years. His best-selling audiobook, That Fateful Night, True Stories of Titanic Survivors in Their Own Words, was nominated for a Grammy. In 2014, Jeffrey Giuliano founded Icon Editions and G2 Media Arts to market his updated works as well as publish new projects. As a visual artist, Jeffrey has been showing in galleries across America since 1977, garnering impressive reviews. His first professional assignment was designing several T-shirts for The Who's Pete Townsend in 1976. Jeffrey also designed and illustrated many of his original rock biographies for the biggest publishers in the world from 1984 to 2006, as well as designing for his pioneering record label, Samba Records, in the mid-1990s. From 2006 to 2011, Jeffrey was also the primary designer for the French fashion house Cotai. When Giuliano first conceived of creating his own literary imprint, Icon Editions, he became responsible for illustrating and designing 35 book covers, several hundred CDs, DVDs, as well as dozens of promotional posters, and eventually an entire collection of exclusive fashion and art. The expansive Design by Giuliano brand grew out of Jeffrey's impressive commitment to the arts and is the culmination of a lifetime's work by an extraordinarily talented and determined Renaissance man.
Peach and Love Records. Thank you for listening.